to 10-5, the official podcast of the OPP Association. I'm your co-host, Scott Mills. Our other co-host for the podcast is Emily Brown. She's not here today. We will miss her, but she will be editing and producing behind the scene this episode. So thank you, Emily, for that. And for those new listeners out there, the OPP Association represents more than 10,000 members of the Ontario Provincial Police in Ontario, Canada. And our members are at the heart of everything we do, and they are our greatest strength. We are dedicated here at the OPPA to keeping our members and the public informed about key issues that impact policing across Ontario. And today, we have a very interesting and important discussion. It's about to happen about accidental death and dismemberment insurance. And we are honored to have our guests here today, one of which who's a former guest on our podcast. John Flesher is a retired OPP Sergeant. He's a former Branch 1 OPPA president down in southwestern Ontario. And we have Laura Ferron, who is our fairly new and extremely competent and nice, great person. She's a senior advisor of pension and benefits at the Ontario Provincial Police Association. And Laura is going to give us her thoughts from I don't want to say an expert perspective, but she is an expert. But she's going to tell us exactly what benefits we have. So listen on. You're also going to hear John's story, which is definitely going to pull on some heartstrings for you. So welcome, John, and welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on the podcast, Scott.
Well, you're very welcome, John, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you back on the podcast, and it's an absolute pleasure to have Laura on the first podcast she's been on, and we hope to get Laura on a few more times as well. And as some of you may recall, John was a guest on episode 76 of the 10-5 podcast almost 3 years ago in November 2022. It was an episode called OPP Cop Therapist. And it's actually one of our top listened to episodes. So this episode will be episode 143. It blows me away that we've done 143 episodes, but we're quite proud as we're closing in on 100,000 downloads since the podcast started in June of 2021. And that may not be a big number on the grand scale of things for major podcasts, but we're definitely a niche podcast, and those numbers are healthy, and we're glad that you're listening out there. So thank you for listening. And we're just so happy to have you, John.
Yeah, congratulations on all the great work, Scott, and 100,000 downloads. That's fantastic. So it's great to be back. I enjoyed the first time, and thank you for having me again.
Well, when I was talking to Laura yesterday, John, she said your banter in between makes this very serious topic a little much more fun. So don't take offense here, John. I have to ask you, I'm not sure if all those clicks on your podcast had to do with your socks in that picture that we put on the artwork, but I have to ask you, did you wear your funky colored socks for this episode?
I still have those odd duck socks, Scott. Thanks for asking, but my wife is the queen of Amazon shopping, and she found me compression socks without toes. So just a little twist on it, but because of my injuries, my wife and usually one of my therapists cuss at me every morning that they have to put those compression socks on me.
Well, we're going to hear about your injuries. It just blew me away. Saddened to hear what happened to you, John, and I'm so happy that we're back talking here. So we're going to hear your story in depth, and I know your wife is sitting right beside you, so thanks for being that good shopper to your wife. And looking after John out here during these past challenging times. And We're going to get our expert opinion from our very own OPPA pension and benefits advisor, Laura. Welcome, Laura, to your first episode. And your predecessors were on here, Lisa Hillstrom and Caitlin. They're both on here quite a bit, and they provided a lot of great information. So we're looking to have you back too. So.
Well, we'll see how this one goes, and then we can go from there. But yeah, these podcasts are a great opportunity to ensure that our members are well informed. So anytime that we have a captive audience, we will take.
That's awesome. Well, listen on here. Here we go. I'm going to give the podium over to John. I believe you're coming from your home today near Sarnia. You can explain all that. And if you can just explain what's going on with you and why you thought it was so important to come back on the podcast to get, the fact of benefits. What benefits do we have? Powers of attorney, wills. We're going to talk all about that. So, John, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Scott. I just want to clarify one point. You being a Chatham-Kent boy, we're not coming to you from Sarnia. It's Corunna. And as I have to explain to big city folks, it's Corunna, not the virus, not the beer.
Well, I just have to tell you that when I was growing up playing ball for Merlin, that we beat Corunna in baseball quite a bit.
I unfortunately have heard that, and that's why people still refer to Merlin as Merlin, like the magician.
All right, enough of cutting each other up from being down in southwestern Ontario here.
So, yes, my wife is fantastic. We've been married 40 years. Now she's sitting helping me kind of scroll the pages here to keep me on cue. But I retired from the OPP in 2015, did a lot of really cool stuff, started in Sombra, taught at the police college, although it's hard for me to see the recruits that I taught in the 90s now retiring. But I'm still around, retired, went back up my master's, became a psychotherapist because I knew after working for the government for 30 years that there was enough dysfunction to keep me busy for quite a while. I went into private practice in 2022, and one of the joys that I had was working with Encompass clients, OPPA members and their families, active and retired. But on an odd off day, I went for a motorcycle ride June 11th, 2024, and I had ridden police motorcycles for 11 years. I've been riding since I bought my first bike from my paper route money. So it was a total shock to me. I was hit from behind by a vehicle doing about 90 kilometers an hour. And we had slowed for a farm vehicle, which again, southwestern Ontario, we know is quite common. And I don't recall any of the events of not only the crash, but that day. What I do know from, the 5,000 pages of medical disclosure from the crash, that I was brought to Blue Water Health by land ambulance, scored a 6 on the trauma scale, and had one of those, in policing days, thought of them as one-way flights by Air Orange, the air ambulance. And I was taken to Victoria ICU, was in a coma for 5 days. And that's what prompted me to respond to Scott's initial message and the reach out, that just wanted to be able to share that experience and what my family went through, and where so many different things like having a power of attorney, having a proper will, but where Laura will come into this conversation as well, what insurance coverages there are, uh, things that we weren't even aware of that were there. But now, 15 months into my recovery, uh, the initial doctor told me that I would be a quadriplegic. I shared with him that I appreciated his opinion, but God had another plan, and I planned to follow it. The next day, I could move my left arm. Now I can move both arms. So I've proven the doctors 50% wrong, and I'm just working at proving them the other 50% wrong. So I apologize. I spoke longer than I had planned, Scott, but I will turn it back over to you.
We're so grateful you're still here with us, and you talk as long as you want because your story is important, and we are all rooting for you out there to get back on your feet. So you continue to be so resilient and insistent on helping others, which is quite inspiring, actually. So I understand that the first thing you said to your wife when you came out of your 5-day coma was that you have clients to see. Like, what's going on with that, John?
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yes. And just a funny little side note to that, because my wife was there 12 hours a day at the hospital and doing so much, but the first thing that she did with her power of attorney is she went to Costco and she switched the Costco membership from my name to her name. But thought some people out there might find that funny.
That is funny.
I think one of the things that we wanted to talk about is the fact that I have no temporal memory, and that is a part of my being diagnosed with PTSD in 2013 after a lot of things going on. So there are other things that come with that, and the sleep apnea, I think a lot of police officers deal with, I wasn't aware of until I think I scared some doctors at the hospital. I stopped breathing for a while, and they did a breathing test on me, and they found that I would have about 50 disruptions of my sleep an hour. And when I did the full sleep test, I would actually go 40 seconds without breathing and then wake up in a panic. And so the 10-5 podcast you did about sleep and so many other topics are so important, and need to make sure that our members are healthy, whether active or retired, and their family members.
It's definitely a thing, sleep. And like, I understand, John, you were in like a 1997 serious crash on duty, and that, that combined with years and years of policing, it's not your first rodeo, being in some scary situations. So I just, my hat's off to you. And yes, listen to those podcasts about sleep. Go get your sleep checked. So important, so important. Like, I use a CPAP machine as well, and it's definitely an improvement to quality of life. So.
And if, sorry, just to jump in real quick, Scott, that crash in 97, I hit a milk truck, and the one-liner I've used since then is that I've been lactose intolerant ever since.
Oh my goodness. So I understand that you're in a coma for 5 days. Your wife was with you pretty much all the time, like at the hospital. Your church started looking after your house. You had a lot of support from both active and retired OPPA members, who I think are probably going to be really happy to hear your voice here. And you had a month stay at Victoria Hospital in London and 4 months stay at Parkwood. I believe that's a rehab hospital in London, if I'm correct. So I want to get right to the heart about what we're talking about today, and that is insured benefits, and in particular, accidental death and dismemberment benefits. They call it ADD. Can you walk us through your situation with benefits, John, so that we can help some others out there?
Well, thanks, Scott. And again, I appreciate you reaching out to me initially, and it was just early at that stage, and a lot of different things were happening. But one of the things that I found is that it was so important to know what benefits we have and don't have. And quite often, as a branch president, I would hear people say, "Oh, I get something from the association that goes directly into a recycling box." Well, that's not the way to handle things. But in my case, I thought I was pretty well informed. But when I bought the critical illness coverage, my thought was about, making sure if someone myself or my wife end up with ALS or MS or something, that I would have that coverage. I wasn't even aware that there was a critical injury component to that. And that, in addition to maximizing coverage, because, we talk about $1 million coverage in collision benefits, and I caught myself, I almost said accident, but as we talked about before, accidents happen in your pants or in bed, collisions happen on the road. So the collision benefits, that very little difference between the cost of premiums between $1 million and $5 million. So know what you have. Talk to the people like Laura and others in Barrie and Target, all those resources that were set up, so that you know what your coverages are that are available, and to get that coverage for you and your family.
Well, thanks, John. You mentioned Target a few times. Target Benefits actually administers the benefits for OPP Association members, and we manage our benefits with them. And it's very important to understand that the people at Target Benefits are absolutely amazing, and they can actually be a kind of a buffer between the insurance companies and give you a lot of good advice and actually tell you what you have for your situation. So it's great to reach out to them. We're going to have their number, as well as a way to reach Laura here, because we're going to turn it over to Laura if you've got any questions. So Laura, can you explain the benefits that our OPPA members are entitled to in situations like John finds himself?
Sure. First, John, thank you so much for sharing your story. I agree, Scott, that resilience is definitely the word to be used. And John, it just sounds like you have a really great support system with your church and your wife and family, and thank you for them as well. And you've hit the 50% mark, and very excited to hear about the next 50% for sure.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you for my silent partner, my wife, that's sitting right here beside me.
Excellent. All right, so here we go. I'm going to do my best to keep all of this simple because, as you know, everyone's favorite topic is insurance and accidental death and dismemberment, or as we commonly call it, AD&D. So this is a two-part benefit, as you would suggest by the name. It covers you if you die unexpectedly from something other than a natural cause. So most of us are familiar with basic life insurance, and that's payable when death happens for any reason. But the accidental death and dismemberment pays out on top of the life insurance when death is the cause of an accident. So I know you don't like that word, John, but that is the word in the contract. So an accident would be drowning, fall, road accident, anything like that. So in the event of a death for any reason, the life insurance would be payable. If death is because of an accident, a separate payment would also be there for an accidental death benefit. And of course, the payment is tax-free to the beneficiary. So the second part, the AD and D, so now the D part is the dismemberment part. So that is another lump sum, and that is a portion that is paid in the event of loss of or loss of use of a body part. So that can be loss of a limb, sight, or it could be paralysis. And that is, of course, for specific types of accidents based on the policy. So the dismemberment benefits are automatically paid to the member, not a beneficiary, and they are tax-free as well. And this money can be used for medical expenses, home, daily living expenses, etc. There's additional benefits that could assist a member depending on the situation. So when you have an approved accident claim, there's also provisions for home alteration or vehicle modification, seatbelt benefits, and many other things that if you're ever bored, you can sit and read your booklet to come through every single aspect of that. So all of our full-time and part-time members who are enrolled in the plan, as well as our retired members, are insured for at least $10,000 of basic accidental death and dismemberment if they're under the age of 75. Upon retirement, eligible members will receive an additional $25,000 of AD&D, and that is paid for by the association, so it's not an out-of-pocket expense. And once you're retired, that $25,000 does terminate at age 65.
Laura,
Yep.
Can you increase your AD&D coverage?
You sure can. As long as the member is actively at work, they can increase that coverage. Members can elect optional AD&D coverage. There's a $10,000 increase option that does require a medical question. So that means you would have to answer medical questions and be approved for that coverage if you are not within 31 days of joining the OPPA.
So how much would something like that cost, Laura?
So actually there's another one as well. I'm just going to throw in there that members can also purchase an optional AD&D coverage from $50,000 all the way up to $500,000. And that one does not need a medical. So that can be purchased for members and for their family. So yes, cost. That's a great question. Everybody wants to know. I'll give you an example at today's rate in 2025. So monthly basic coverage would be about $3.30 per month. $100,000 for the member only would cost approximately $560 a month. And if the member wanted to cover the whole family, so that would be the spouse and eligible children, that would be just under $8. And if you wanted to go halfway and get $250,000 for the member only, that would be $14 a month. And for family coverage, that would be $18.50.
Well, thanks, Laura. I understand that there's a critical illness rider and a disease rider. Can you explain that?
Sure. So that's actually great. I would love to talk about that. So our AD&D has a special feature, which is unique to us or somewhat unique to us. So that's a great question. All our AD&D policies, or accidental death and dismemberment policies, have a rider that's often known and forgotten. As John said, it's not something, insurance isn't something that we think about every day unless you're doing my job. But when you do need it, then that's when we tend to look into it. So there is a critical illness or critical disease rider, and rider just means provision or addition. So there's a special critical illness and disease rider that's embedded in our AD&D product. So
Laura, I keep hearing, when we're talking back and forth, you're saying stuff, CI. Like what is it might seem like a stupid question here, but what is a CI?
Okay, so CI is the abbreviation for critical illness, and it's not stupid at all. Critical illness is actually a relatively new product. Just to give you a little bit of the history, because it's kind of interesting. This product is actually unusual because usually a product team at an insurance company develops something. But this was a heart surgeon who used to perform surgeries, and he was quite successful. And then he realized that his patients are surviving, and physically they're much better, but financially they're damaged because there's often costs associated with recovery. And the life insurance, of course, was in place when someone died, but survivors didn't have anything to help them during that recovery period. So this surgeon worked with insurance companies, and that resulted in our product that we have today of critical illness. So
why are we even talking about CI? Is this like a rider only?
So it's a critical illness is a lump sum benefit that when you have an approved diagnosis, or a disease that's outlined in the policy, the member can receive that, and the money is tax-free. And they can use it however they want. I've known people who've used it to make modifications to their home, like the stair lift. Some people have used an alternate treatment. Some people just say, I just want to take a trip and relax for a while. So the rider is on our accidental death and dismemberment. So when we're talking about AD&D, there is that rider, and the payout for the critical illness would be based upon an approved illness. The maximum amount of coverage under the rider is $10,000 for the member and $5,000 for the spouse. So, for example, if a member was diagnosed with stage 4, let's say, and they had 100,000
stage 4 cancer type thing.
Yes. So
okay.
let's do an example of a member diagnosed with stage 4 cancer,
Okay.
and they had 100,000 of family AD&D in place. Then they could receive a payout of 15% to a maximum of 10,000. So in that case, they would have a critical illness claim of $10,000. Okay. And if there was a spouse, the spouse would be, or child would be eligible for 10% to a maximum of 5,000. Now with this rider, it insures against 8 illnesses. So there are 8 of the most common illnesses for the spouse and the member. So that's heart attack, stroke, life-threatening cancer, kidney failure, blindness, severe burns, MS, etc. And there's 3 conditions for children, which is blindness, life-threatening cancer, and severe burns. So as we've said, this rider is not often known, and it can be forgotten. And, you know, I'm sure as John was going through his recovery period, that was not necessarily the first thing on his mind. But we want to take this opportunity to remind our members that, yes, you want to look at your benefits, and sometimes you don't necessarily see critical illness listed, but you see accidental death and dismemberment. So because you see that, you will also have some critical illness coverage, and you should ask more questions to find out what you have coverage for there.
So how do you actually claim it, Laura?
So once someone is diagnosed, then they would reach out to target benefits administrators, and they would need to be notified within about 6 months of the diagnosis date. And that coverage needs to be in place for at least 90 days before the diagnosis. So the member basically should call Target for assistance and to initiate a claim.
And I keep asking all these questions. I hope you don't mind. But are there any other coverage for illnesses?
Yes, there are. So we actually do have a standalone optional critical illness product. So I know it can be confusing. We were just talking about accidental death, and there's a critical illness rider. Now we're talking about a standalone optional critical illness. So if anyone wanted to purchase just the critical illness for their family or themselves, they could. And because this one is a standalone product, it covers 31 illnesses. So it is an optional benefit, so a member would have to actually select it. And here they can choose an amount of critical illness between $5,000 all the way up to $250 for themselves or their spouse. And if you didn't want to answer medical questions, then a member could get up to $50,000 and the spouse could get up to $25,000 without answering any medical questions at all. And children do not need to answer medical questions for the CI coverage. And fortunately, this coverage can be carried right on into retirement. So if the member is eligible for benefits in retirement, it can be continued and it would terminate at age 70. I'm sure, Scott, you're going to ask me about the cost.
Okay, you read my mind.
So I'll just give you an idea. It's based on the amount that you purchase. And so let's say a male aged 45 who is a non-smoker, they could purchase about $25,000 for about $12 a month. A female aged 35 who is a smoker could purchase $50,000 at a premium of about $18 a month. And in addition, you can cover your children for $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, and we just increased it in March of this year. So you can also choose $20,000 or $25,000. And for children, they're insured against 16 types of illnesses.
Is the claiming method the same for the standalone CI? CI meaning critical illness again, for those following along here.
There you go. Look at you using the acronym.
I'm just a layperson here. You're losing me half the time.
So yes, the claiming process is the same as accidental death and dismemberment. Basically, what you want to do is if you're diagnosed, you want to call Target as soon as you can and ask them to confirm your coverage and make sure that you have the information that you need.
So basically, if you don't know, like me listening to this, I'm like, do I have this coverage? So we just call Target, and if we want to increase it, can you just explain that? Like, go on about that.
Sure. So everyone who's enrolled in the plan does have at least 10,000 of accidental death and dismemberment. So that we do know. So I can tell you have that if you're on the plan. And I've only provided a high-level summary, of course. We can't get into the specifics of everyone. And there's always restrictions and provisions in the details, which a member would need to ask about. But if anyone is interested in this coverage, they should reach out to Target to ask for more information. We're going to send out, Scott, you can help me here, but I believe we're going to send out some information when this podcast is sent.
Sure. We're gonna. So how that's gonna work is some of this stuff we just are gonna put on the members only side. The podcast is available publicly, but on the members only side of our website, there's kind of two spots we post the podcast: the public one and then our members feed. So if you're logged into the OPPA website, we're gonna put a bunch of more information on there. That you can access through the OPPA website. And if you don't have access to that website and you want it, just send us an email, communications@oppa.ca, and we'll get you set up so that you can access that. And that email goes for anything you want here. Like if hey, can you put me in touch with the right person? Communications@oppa.ca goes to Emily and myself, as well as Josh, our former host of the podcast. That's who we started it with. Josh is actually going to be our boss again. And Josh will see that too. So you're in good hands to get you connected with the right people. Communications, plural, @oppa.ca.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Scott. And just to make sure for our members, always make sure that the coverage that you want is in place before you retire. Once you've retired, you can reduce your coverage, but you can't increase your coverage.
Well, thanks for all this information, Laura. It is a bit overwhelming, to be honest. And I'm glad people can hit the repeat button on this podcast to review and understand. So, John, I want to go over to you. For a few things. You're hearing all this stuff. Your wife is sitting beside you hearing all this stuff. You've just gone through an incident. And I know we're going to talk about the importance of power of attorney and a will. But let's be honest here. You're lucky to be alive. And any of us can face a sudden death of a loved one anytime. And do you have any advice on anything that Laura's just said and on POAs, power of attorneys, and wills? And I'm sure we can take the conversation from there. Laura can fill in some blanks after you give us your 2 cents.
Prior to us starting this podcast, just as a shout out to Gavin May, he would always remind us, and if you forget the number or you forget who to call, people like Laura that are so full of information, 1-800-461-4282. Sorry, I had to give a shout out to Gavin.
That's funny. So that's the number, just so everybody's aware. That goes to our reception area at OPPA head office in Barrie, and they can also direct you to whoever you need.
Yeah, and when I was in the hospital and needed something from Target, didn't have the number at hand, the folks in Barrie were nice enough to do that, as well as connecting with legal or so many of the things in stressful times. I joke with people, I have survived 30 years of policing. My wife has been patient enough to be with me for 40 years. I never expected to be involved in this type of collision. And that's why it's so important to have your will, power of attorney, insurance coverage, all of those things set in place. Same as we've always said, build a relationship with a therapist before you're in crisis. That's the important thing to make sure that all your ducks are in a row. And I appreciate the chance to talk about this because I am essentially the same person I was before the crash, other than I'm in a power wheelchair. I was calling it electric chair and people were getting all awkward and nervous, so I have to stop saying that. But I people joke that I still have the same sense of humor, and my wife says, yeah, she had hoped that would have been lost in the crash. She's never found me funny. But I will turn it back to Laura as the expert of all things benefits to discuss that a little bit more.
Sure. So we as the association support the surviving family members of anyone who passes away. Personally, I have the privilege of supporting the families of any of our active members, and any opportunity that we have to remind members, to urge them, to plead with them to have a will, we will take. So please make sure that you have a will in place. It's not something that we tend to want to talk about. We keep putting it off. But if we think about it, as members, all our members have dedicated their lives to serving others. And this is just another way that you can serve someone. In this case, you're serving your own family and loved ones. And you really want to make sure that you have a will in place for that. Now, we've also mentioned, before I go to a power of attorney, the will is needed for Ontario Shared Services in the event of a death in order to pay out the termination benefits. So the last pay, vacation, and sometimes it's required for the pension as well. So it's sometimes we think we don't have property or we don't have dependents, but it is still something that is very essential to have a will in place and to make sure that those around us know how to access it. That is also important. With regards to the power of attorney, so a power of attorney is in place to give someone the authorization to speak on your behalf while you are alive. So once you pass away, the power of attorney is void, and we start to look at the will. But John mentioned he was in a coma for 5 days, and I'm sure decisions needed to be made. And who's the one who can make that decision? So it would give, it enables his wishes and his will to be known to everyone. So the association and target will need a power of attorney for property, but I always just encourage members to have both, because you will usually, if you need someone to speak on behalf of your property, you will also need someone to speak on behalf of your medical care. So typically, just make sure that you've got that power of attorney in place as well as your will. We do have, as you know, we work with the OPPA Credit Union, and they have a great partnership with Legal Wills Canada. If you go to their website, you can scroll down and you can use theirs as well. So we just want to really encourage our members to please, if you don't have that in place, please get that up to date and make sure that those around you know how to access that information.
Thanks so much, Laura. Very helpful. I just want to give a shout out. Like, we have been throwing phone numbers around here and stuff like that. If you call OPPA head office front desk, you're probably going to talk to Dawn, Lexi, or Karen. And a shout out to them. They are absolutely phenomenal human beings who bend over backwards every single day to get you connected with the right people. So, and if you do call in, you may be talking to Aaron and Deborah, who actually work with Laura. And Aaron and Deborah, they do a lot of the legwork on all this type of stuff. So shout out to Aaron and Deborah in the benefits department as well. We used to have Marilyn there. Marilyn retired, and if you're listening, Marilyn, hi, we miss you. So the numbers are, as John said, 1-800-461-4282. That goes to our front desk, and there's also a 705-728-6161 number. And again, communications@oppa.ca if email. Those numbers are available Monday to Friday. They're also they'll bump you to an on-call person on the weekend. But for these types of calls, you probably need to call during business hours. John, I want to thank you and your wife for joining us today. Do you have any last words for us?
Well, since you did the shout out to Marilyn, I'll also do a shout out to KK because I love to call the 1-800 number and just hear her voice as far as the selection of one or two. So it makes me smile even to hear that. No, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on with Laura to get that messaging out. And the journey continues. I am doing therapy in the apartment 3 days a week at Parkwood, and Mind Moves at New Physio in London 2 days a week. So when I'm not in therapy, I'm still catching up. I haven't been on social media since before the crash. So I apologize to anyone that I haven't gotten back to, but it has been a slow process using Dragon Speak to do text or talk to text to try and reach out to these folks. But I've appreciated all that support since June of last year.
It's so nice to hear your voice, and I'm sure many people that know you and they hear this, they'll be comforted to know what your status is, John. And we're just so grateful that you're able to join us here today. And thanks again to your wife for facilitating it and helping out. We're coming right to the end here. So, Laura, do you have any last words here before we go?
I would just say to you, Scott, thanks so much for always getting this information out in the podcast. I would say to John, thank you so much for sharing your journey. And it's really a testament to who you are, that you go through this. And then your response is to turn around and make sure others have information. So that's really speaks to who you are. And thank you for that. And to all our other members, just please reach out to our benefits team if we can help you at all. We're only a phone call away or an email away. And we're here to help. As Scott said, our members are what powers us to move forward.
Well, thank you very much, John. Thank you very much, Laura. You've been listening to retired OPP Sergeant and psychotherapist John Flesher and Ontario Provincial Police Association Senior Pension and Benefits Advisor Laura Ferron, talking about accidental death and dismemberment insurance on 10-5, the official podcast of the OPP Association. If you like what you hear, please hit subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice so you never miss an episode. New episodes are currently being released mostly on the first Friday of each month, but sometimes we throw a surprise in there. So if you have any questions for John or for Laura or have any ideas for future episodes, please email us at communications@oppa.ca. Special shout out to Emily, who is going to be editing this and for our publication. She'll be hearing this, and we thank her for all she does behind the scenes here. And look forward to having her back co-hosting with our next episode. So until next time, thanks for listening and stay safe.